Wait till you see what I did. I've taken the label off some jeans. I've taken them all off. Every single label that was stitched on inside and outside of the jeans. Doesn't matter whether they were Levi or 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗏. And then I made these gorgeous little journals using the labels. I'll show you how to make them. The first thing you've got to do is remove the label. Now just a tip, before you go taking the labels off your old jeans, do a Google search to make sure you haven't got a vintage pair, especially the Levi's that are 501. They are worth anywhere from $160, $70 to $250 upward. So just check first. I've just used an unpicker. Just be careful when you take these labels off. They're not always made of leather. They are like a paper. It's a faux leather. They will tear if you pull on them too hard. So be careful taking your labels off. Take all the labels off the outside and the inside of your jeans. You can use them all. And that even goes for this little pocket label on the side here. Now we're going to make some pages. Now you don't need a lot of paper to make these little journals. Now when you're using these labels for your cover, when you fold them in half, they are quite narrow. So if you want your pages to be a little bit wider than the folded Levi label, you can make your pages wider so that they just stick out a little bit. To make the pages, all I'm using is copy paper. I've tea dyed it, or this might be coffee dyed, and when you fold it in half lengthwise, I'm just going to cut a slither off one side, and that's going to give me two separate pieces of paper. Then I'm going to fold them in half again, and then I'm going to divide it up into 4 lots of signatures. I'm only going to use 3 signatures with 2 pages in each signature. I'm going to remove one page and replace it with a pretty pattern paper. Now that you've got your 3 signatures ready, put them all together, cut them off evenly, top and bottom. You can have it a little bit shorter than your cover. I've made mine the same height as my cover. I've left the width a little bit wider. I'm going to cut it off later on. And I've gone ahead and I've cut out all of the pages for all the other labels as well. Now I'm going to bind the pages. You can bind the pages directly to your label, but I'm going to bind them to a piece of fabric. I do some on fabric, but I'm going to do this one using a fabric tape measure. So I choose the tape measure I want. I just tear it off and fold it in half so that gives me my center line. And then I'm marking 3 holes all the way down the center and another 3 holes either side of that so that I can do the 3-hole pamphlet stitch and sew in 3 signatures. Once I've marked the holes on my tape measure, I'm just going to use my pokey tool and push holes where those marks are. Then I'm going to transfer all of those holes to the pages. Now I've marked my pages, I'm going to use my pokey tool and push the holes through all of the pages as well. Now I'm going to sew the signatures to the piece of tape. So using the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, I'll sew the center signature in, then I'll sew the back one, and then I sew the front one in. Now I've got my signatures all sewn onto my binding, which is my piece of tape, and it looks so good. Now it's pretty easy to attach the binding to the cover. I'm just going to glue it straight in. I'm using the 𝘄𝗁𝗶𝗃𝗏 fabric glue, and I'm just going to put it on the wrong side of my tape and just make sure it's in the center of my cover. and glue it into place. Now I've got that glued into place, I'm just going to close the journal up and cut off this excess, but I'm going to cut it off because I can see through my ruler. I'm just going to cut it off to where I think it looks good. So once you've cut that excess off, that's it, your journal's finished. I'm just going to put some trim in between each signature just to give you some ideas. So I'm going to add some of this blue trim and a piece of this Edith Holden snippet roll. It's pretty simple, just cut off what you want and glue it on the edge so that it's hanging over. Now I've got all my trim on, I'm just going to add the pocket label to the back of this journal. The way these labels face, you can't put them on the front, you've got to put them on the back, otherwise your word Levi will be upside down. Now I've got some coffee dyed gauze here. I'm just roughly cutting that out and I'm going to make a bow and tie that off to finish it off. I'm going to make a couple more. I'm not going to show you exactly how to make each one because it's exactly the same method. I'll just show you any variation. I'll just point them out. Now the difference between this one and the first one is I'm gluing gauze down inside the cover and some fabric. So I've got my fabric piece ready, I've transferred all my holes in it and I've sewn my signatures to the fabric piece. I'm going to glue a piece of the gauze straight down to the inside of the Levi's label. And then I'm going to glue my signatures and binding over the top of that. Once that's in place, I then trim off the excess. Glue my little pocket label to the back, and this one looks so sweet. I'm also going to add the label that was on the inside of these jeans to the front here. Just happens that it fits perfectly and peeks out the top like a tab. I tie it up with a piece of green hemp string. I couldn't be happier with the way these look. They look just like I envisioned them in my mind. Now this one here is a Lee Cooper tag. This one is actually made of leather. It is smaller, so I'm going to add a single signature to this one instead of sewing in the 3 like the ones before it. So I'm doing the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, I'm using the tape measure again, and I'm just sewing that single signature onto the tape measure and gluing that into the little leather label, and I've just let a bit of the tape hang over the top and I've put a piece of hat elastic around to hold it closed. That one is very simple, but it turns out so cute. You could do that with a Levi's one as well. Now I've just got these 2 to make up. These are a little bit bigger label because they were on men's jeans. The first 2 I made were ladies' jeans, so they're a little bit smaller. This one here, I'm using 3 signatures and sewing that onto a piece of tea-dyed cotton material. And then on the very first signature, I've glued down the 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗲𝗿 label that was inside the jeans on that first signature, just so it's peeking out off to the side. Put the size label on the next signature and the Levi's pocket label on the back. And this one I'm just going to put a paper clip to hold it closed. Now, what if you don't want to use fabric? You haven't got fabric, you're not a fabric type of person at all, you'd rather use paper. This one I'm using wrapping paper. I think it's packing paper. It's not cardboard and it's not paper. So I've just torn it out so that it's just slightly taller than my label, so it's going to peek out from the top and the bottom. I've glued a little bit of sari trim at the top of the label, and then I'm gluing my signature straight over the top of that And then I've got one of the labels that were inside the jeans. I think this is a care label, and I've folded it over the first page of the first signature, and then I glue the size label underneath it, and I'm going to use this label as a tie. So I glue a piece of sari silk straight through the middle of it, make it long enough to act as a tie, and just tie that around the journal. This one hasn't got a pocket, the Levi pocket label on the back, because it's already got that written on the 504 label. I like this one. I think this is probably almost my favorite, this one. I really do like it. I think you'll have a lot of fun making these little journals. They are so cute. I hope you head off to the charity shop and pick up some jeans. That's all I did. I went through and picked the ones with the best looking labels. I didn't care what size they were, men's or women's. And while you're looking in the charity shop, keep your eye out for those vintage jeans. You'd be surprised if you find a pair, you might make yourself a couple $100 in the process. Let me know if you find any. And if you really love these little mini journals, have a look at this one that's made using vintage matchboxes.
21 degrees and sunny, just the way I always wanted.